Hello and welcome to the next class. I'm Rob Birdsell, your host, and joined as always by, wait, I'm confused. I've got two co-hosts here today. My usual Tom Burnford, but Tom's predecessor, Rob Schnieders, the original co-host of the next class. Tom and Rob, welcome to the next class.
Co-host emeritus or something? What is this?
There we go.
That's
Rob, it's
great,
great to have
great.
you back on the show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
How have you guys
So
been doing the past couple weeks?
good. I've been doing well, thank you. I've been doing well. How about you, Rob?
Well, to our listeners who've been listening for the past couple years, I have to say I finally submitted to COVID, and
Yeah,
it was a knockdown, drag out, brutal experience. But anybody over 50, get your Paxlovid. I could not move for 2 days. The third day, I was ready to run a marathon. It was the most
that's
bizarre
amazing.
thing.
Is
That's
Amazing.
that
amazing.
your first time? Not to get too far into your medical history,
Yeah,
but
first
that's
time.
like a unicorn. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
First
yeah.
time, and I want it to be my last time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was my big experience since our last podcast, Tom. But for our listeners that may not have remembered Rob Schnieders from season one, Rob has spent a long history in education. Most recently is the chief academic officer of Amerigo Education. Prior to that, he was the associate dean at the University of Chicago's Graham School, where he oversaw their online and continuing education programs. He's also done work at Northwestern, at a firm called Deltec, where he led instructional design teams for university online programs all across the country, working with many Catholic universities, especially Jesuit universities. So, Rob, welcome back.
Great to be with you.
So, what have you been doing since you left us at Amerigo?
Well, I've been busy. So yeah, I am now at Fairfield University and as Vice President of Online Strategy and Innovation there. So, day job is really leading our online programs there, mostly on the graduate side, but involved in a number of exciting initiatives, including the launch of a new campus designed to serve some students in the Bridgeport Connecticut community. So we talk about whatever you want, but that's what I've been doing.
Well, Rob, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that because changes in higher education have obviously been huge, particularly when it comes to online education, both before COVID and also after. I know, I do a lot of work with high schools, and we've watched what's going on at higher ed for years. So, what is Fairfield doing looking forward, particularly in terms of online education? What are some of the plans that you see?
Yeah, I think it's your mention of the last couple of years, right? Whether it's at
Yeah,
the secondary level or companies, but certainly higher education was thrust into sort of an emergency response with online, right? And
yeah,
I know from our conversations with principals and professors and everyone that everyone's got an impression now about online, but it's really important to sort of unpack what are they calling online, right? So
yeah.
as Rob Birdsell mentioned, I've been involved in the early days of really being an ambassador for the modality, right, and trying to convince just as with in-person education, there's good and bad, right? And we've been through it all. But the same is true of online, certainly, right? It's a modality that we're still in the early days of, I think, really fully capitalizing and appreciating. But for
Hmm.
Fairfield, the university began about 2 years ago. And for universities, this is really a mandatory element of education delivery,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
right? So and quite often it's at the graduate side, but universities across the country and across the world are doing interesting work in short form programs and reaching different audiences than before, right? We look at this really as a way to extend the reach of Fairfield into some new disciplines, some new populations. Our undergraduate community is well established. Our graduate programs are growing. And like a lot of, Rob Birdsell mentioned Jesuit universities that over the last 20 years have been growing graduate programs. That's really where Fairfield sees online playing and is helping us to kind of grow the graduate ranks.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, And do you have online undergraduate too, or is it the focus really graduate?
Yeah, we do not currently. So of course, during COVID, there was a
Wow.
lot of mixed mode learning. But yeah, we're very much a residential experience in the undergraduate side, and that'll probably continue. There are some for schools that have as a purpose, sort of a mission and identity around outreach. There's perhaps not the standard form factor of the degree, but all kinds of really interesting outreach activities that can be done online. So there we might do that even at younger levels than undergraduate, but the formal degree programs focus is really graduate for online for us at least.
Interesting.
So you mentioned this new college, new campus. Can you share with us what that's all about?
Yeah, so really exciting. More to come in the next couple of months, in fact, in terms of public announcements. But so this is what we're referring to as Fairfield Bellarmine. There are, your listeners and viewers might know of, sort of similar initiatives that were initiated by Loyola University or St. Thomas in Minnesota. And the idea is really to provide access to a Jesuit, undergraduate education experience to a population that, from an affordability standpoint and a support standpoint, really hasn't had the opportunity at scale to engage in that. And so, learning from the forerunners at Loyola and elsewhere, we're embarking on a similar initiative. So this will be a 2-year program in Bridgeport, Connecticut. This is designed to serve students that they may or may not be first generation, but they will all have demonstrated financial needs. So
Hmm.
the average family outlay will be on the order of $1,000 a year. So using
Wow.
federal and our own programs, really trying to dramatically reduce the cost. But I think there's been a lot of work in higher education over the last great work, in fact, over the last 30 plus years, expanding access. But our initiative is really about ensuring outcomes. And so what we're doing specifically at the 2-year level is embedding professional internships, specializations. The associate's degree that students will get is actually offered by our colleges. So students will have an opportunity to specialize in business or engineering and other programs as well, even in that 2-year experience. Then they'll have the opportunity to either move on to their chosen career and profession, or to move on to whether it's Fairfield or another university for the third and fourth.
Okay. To go on for the
Yeah,
full bachelor's. Yeah. Okay. Undergrad degree.
that's
Yeah.
right. And and
Interesting.
there's been some great success early on. I mentioned the other universities, and we're just excited to serve a population that really has not had the opportunity to participate in a university at scale like Fairfield.
And Rob, why not on campus? Why I forgot where you said it's going to be, but Bridgeport. Why in Bridgeport,
Bridgeport.
not on campus?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's for us there are some practicalities that lead us to consider an alternative location. We're as I mentioned, we're also learning from the work that Loyola and St. Thomas have done, but accessibility to public transportation is a major driver.
Yeah.
We also want to play a really lasting and deep role in the engagement with the community in Bridgeport. So we're looking to learn from community members, from organizations, both corporations and nonprofit organizations that work in that area. So we see it as accretive to the broader mission that we have around diversity and equity and inclusion, and not competitive, right? So we're also looking to simultaneously enroll more students of color, students with need, generally at Fairfield. And we're interested to see, if we provide full access to all the opportunities that, both of our campuses have to offer, career services, all of that, how we can kind of build the two up together.
Yeah.
And have you guys? I know early on with Rupe at Loyola, there was talk about the work study program from Christ Ray as a critical component. They subsequently did not do that for a number of reasons. You mentioned internship. Are you considering a work study program for financial reasons, but also for experiential reasons?
Yeah, so not during the core academic year necessarily, though the schedule is set up so that there are mornings or afternoons, depending on a rotating basis, to allow for that. Our focus is really in between the first and second year. There will be a professional internship, there will be a paid internship. And so we're really recruiting a network of organizations. They're going to sponsor these students for that kind of intervening
Nice. Yeah.
summer.
Yeah.
So,
I
they
like
can
it.
be, students will be working for sure, but we're not taking a model that is more sort of mandatory that like a Cristo Rey would have. It's really fitting it around the schedule in the year and going deep in the summer. Yeah.
I mean, Rob, I think that's great. And in one sense, I'm Catholic. It makes me proud to be Catholic because clearly this is an initiative of an established university to reach out and serve those who may not have easy access to high quality education and to provide it, which is a big piece of what we do as church. And you see that in Catholic higher education. So kudos to you guys for reaching out in that regard. It's critical to our mission, and sounds like you're making some headway in that regard. So yeah,
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 we're really, really, really excited about it, and I think there will be a lot of learning that comes out of it, and we'll iterate as we go. But
yeah,
we're just very excited about the initiative.
yeah. So
When is
Rob, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
what is the launch, Rob?
Yeah, so we're going to have the first students start in September of 2023. So recruiting is underway for that first class. We envision this as roughly 100 students per year at scale.
Mhm.
So it's a pretty it's a size that we're confident that we can really attend to all of the needs that students are going to have and deliver a great experience.
That's great. So Rob, I got a sort of a more technical question from my own experience because you've got a lot of experience in designing and starting programs that have an online educational element. And about 10, 15 years ago, when I was working in the Archdiocese of Washington, I tried that. And in some sense, it went poorly, right? So my question is what advice do you have for people who want to deliver education in whatever their content area is in an online way? And for us, it was we were trying to design a training program for Catholic school teachers to form them in faith. And we met up with some technology people, a firm, and said, hey, we've got content, you've got delivery, help us design a proper online system that has embedded video and this and this and this. And it was a complete bear. And to be frank, I wish that someone larger had done this at a super high quality and we just bought it off the shelf, right? So I bit off more than I could chew. And I'm curious, what advice do you have for people who are in that situation? Because a lot of people hear about online education and think, well, I can do that. I can start something. I can put my own content out there. What advice would you have for people who are in that situation?
Yeah, boy, there's so much in there, Tom. I mean, I think that two things that I would pick up on immediately from your description of that, and I'm sure that you're using the word content, but you really mean learning experience, right? But
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think that is a problem that I often see, from whether it's a first time online instructor or new initiatives, they're thinking of this as right that transmission of content, and it's just you get really tied up in how are we going to do the video? What's the
Yeah.
platform?
Yeah.
And I think it's really quite important to think about the nature of the learning experience you're trying to engender and make sure that that it's faithful to what you would do in person, for instance, right? And I think that so it kind of starts with that. I mean, the second thing is to your point about that audience and trying to some of the outcomes were around formation of faith, and it was a population that you'd worked with before. I think there's a lot around, what that group of learners really wants and needs, and how are we going to reach them and engage them and sustain the effort. I mean, it's convenient to be online. It's great, so
Yeah.
that's kind of a minimum. But I think there's often things that we as teachers or we as learners could miss if we're not properly attending to the design of the online experience.
Right.
And so, I think those are a couple starting points, but one of the things that I've really used over the course of my career and working with instructional designers is this notion of the community of inquiry, right? And you may have heard of this. It's a theory that's been around for a while, it simply looks at a few different areas of presence. And I find that actually it's nicely related to sort of Ignatian pedagogy and cura personalis and this whole, reflection, communication. But the main element of this community, sorry to go too deep on this, but the main aspect of community of inquiry, I think, is really profoundly useful for those that are embarking on an online initiative, is really social presence. And by that we mean, does the individual have a way to fully express themselves in a variety of means, right? Like, how do we stimulate community? Because no question the instructor is going to come through, right? The content's going to be there. But, in the early days of online, it was pretty flat, right? It was a lot of, a message board and you're interacting and there's some, I think in fairness, some of the critique we could have of education writ large, right? What's easy to assess is sometimes what gets taught. Multiple choice. Certainly that was true of online, right? So I think the hallmark of really great and engaging online is really that kind of notion of social presence. And I think if you're talking to learners along the way or formally surveying, you want to hear them saying things like, I really felt like I understood my fellow learners and who they were. I got to understand people differently through this process. I'll share with you, I had the opportunity to build an early learning management system, and this was years ago, right? But in the first days of online, you tended not to see pictures of people, right? It was just sort of names, and we started to put identity in visual form into things like discussions. And it was very interesting, the mixed reaction we had to that, right? And I think we're well beyond this, but professors would say, I kind of like the anonymity. Like, I just love this person's ideas, and I really relished that, and not right, not. And so, I think it's important. And I'll end with this. I apologize for the long-winded answer, but it's important to not kind of pave the cow path, right? To say, okay, here, how do we do the on-ground thing in this new technology mediated way, right? It's what are the new advantages of this that really can help us create some new kinds of learning. I think that, as instructors, we can miss that moment of insight, that sort of aha moment, right? But there's all kinds of different new ways that you can both inspire that and observe that, right? Anyway, it's just different, right?
No, I mean, Rob, that's so significant because I can see and feel how far we've come since I attempted this probably about 12 years ago now, in terms of the things that you've said, which are so key in terms of that community aspect, and also engaging people in what they want to learn. 10, 15 years ago, I know in my situation, we were much more focused on what we thought people needed to know. But we took less time saying, what do you need to know? And this is adults, right? And just some mistakes. And it's an infant system, but your points bring out, I think, how much we've progressed, how much is learned, and how much thought needs to go into the learner experience and the goals.
And I think, Tom, one thing also from what you said is I wish that I had the opportunity just to take something off the shelf that was great, right? And this is still part of the problem, right? Because, as schools or teachers, we're tending to sort of reinvent the wheel rather than creating a few great experiences, right?
Yep.
So things like adaptive learning, right, that really do meet that learner need exactly where they are, or, really interesting social simulation, multiplayer type things. These are expensive to create, right? And our system of, publishers kind of ruling the roost with this and has not helped us, right? And, I think organizations like Catholic Virtual High School, like through the power of networks and having some potential to have large scale adoption of great experiences, it's that sort of thing, right? Still highly collaborative and not cookie cutter, right? But more than any one teacher could hope to do on their own, I think is where we'll get to eventually.
That's great. Thank you.
We're going to take a brief pause and hear a message from our sponsor. We'll be right back.
Catholic Virtual is the trusted online education partner of Catholic schools worldwide. We develop customized online learning solutions to meet the needs of our partner schools and their students. Visit our website at www.catholicvirtual.com to learn more. Now back to the episode.
Rob, that was really interesting and leads me to sort of the next question. You have a unique perspective for this conversation with your decades of experience in higher ed, but most recently in secondary ed, Catholic secondary education. Taking your two experiences there in higher ed online, but the past 5 years in secondary Catholic education, where do you see online playing a role in secondary Catholic education going forward? You know, if you were to look out the next 5 years, what do you see impact the role of online in Catholic secondary education?
That's a big question.
It is. I think, and I know that, you're both experts in this, and so I'll just try to offer, my perspective. I think that, the real opportunity for me is, if I'm a student, sitting in Chicago at a Catholic high school, a Catholic grade school, I'm sure that there are phenomenal teachers there and that there's deep expertise, right? But there's unquestionably in any grade school pockets where, I remember in fifth grade at a pretty average public school in the Detroit area, I finished the math book in December, and I came up to the teacher and I said, "What's next?" And he said, "I guess sixth grade." And I was like, "Well, that's not a very good answer. I think I'll slow down." Right? And it's that kind of thing, right? Whether it's like meeting learners with unique needs, maybe it's attending to the passion a student has for a subject, allowing students to accelerate, meet other learners around the world, right? Solve problems. I think that, beyond just access to things like, advanced placement and hard to teach, find courses, right? In some areas, I think the real potential is how we can start to bring the real world into our classrooms, right? And I tried to pitch this idea unsuccessfully to some principals during COVID because they had their hands full. But I said, hey, maybe this is the opportunity to take a couple of your subjects, go block schedule, right? Kids are at home. Why don't we go interdisciplinary meets real world with this? And, let's patch a scientist from NASA in, or consider, the ethical implications of AI. There was too much to handle at that point in time, right? But with proper planning, I think that's how school systems, archdioceses, groups like yours can really start to, let's reconsider the bell schedule. Let's reconsider, this curriculum, recognizing, right, of course, that colleges are going to, it's all chained together. But I think that's the kind of the thing that's right around the corner is real world engagement for students.
Well, you just look at the way we used to do podcasts around. We had a studio time in our old office, and guests would come to our office and into our studio. Now we're all at home, and instead of a 3-hour ordeal, it's a 45-minute podcast experience. And you just think about, I totally agree with you, Rob, bringing experts into the classroom. When I was teaching, I taught a course called Banned Books on Censorship. And I would have a lawyer and alum who was a First Amendment scholar and lawyer come in and talk to them. But for him, it was a half day.
Yeah.
He had to, block off a whole half day. That's asking a lot. He'd do it once a year, but now you could get like world-renowned experts to Zoom in for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about religious orders who are short on religious priests, nuns, brothers, and how can they use technology to move them around within their systems of schools, even globally, and keep a clear charism globally through usage of technology, which is just another example of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is such an interesting topic, right? Because again, we're not looking to replace in-person interactions, but from a consistency and from an access point of getting to meet some of the leaders, in the field, I think one of the challenges to be solved is really a pretty mundane one about adoption, right? Whether it's adoption of curriculum or, the way that our academic years flow one to the next. Some of this, you almost need to pause and really give some intentional time for design as a school leader, as a teacher, to kind of get out of that day to day, or it's never going to happen, right? I mean, I
Right.
think that's part of the challenge is we're a bit like an airport or airlines, right? Like, if you make it through that day and 4.5% of the planes were delayed or whatever, like, I mean, every day is so challenging, right?
Yeah.
How do you make that space for really evolutionary, revolutionary kind of innovation?
Well, and that's exactly what we've been talking about, Rob Birdsell, on the next class, right? We've been talking about how do you transform the way we deliver education in various modalities. Yeah.
Rob, want to respect your time here, but I was thinking about this question as you're talking. If you remember in Park City at the ILE seminar, Kent Hickey and I gave a talk about the fourth R, reading, writing, arithmetic, and relationship.
Mhm.
And I don't think any of us realized how important relationship was going to become, a year after that 2019 convening. And how talk to us and our listeners about relationship in online education. I think it's obvious when you're in person that the fundamental relationship between teacher and student is so critical. I think when everyone is remote, that was one of the reasons for learning loss, also mental health issues, was a loss of relationship, not only with teacher but with friends. Can you talk about relationship in an online environment?
Yeah, I think that in looking at the three of us, I mean, I think we all composed papers on typewriters, at one point. And I know for me, it was hard to consider sitting down at a word processor and writing originally, right, without having drafted it out. And I think when we think about even relationship and different sort of technologies or in person, I think it's really, that has moved so quickly, right, across Gen Z, et cetera. So I think it's not to discount certain forms of community and relationship or others, or even look to kind of like contrast them. I think it's all important, right? Like we know how to do it well in person with the correct kind of conditions and climate and time
Right.
and intent, right? We also know, it's just that not all of us know, like how to form community and keep community going in a completely technology mediated way, right? Like look at things like Twitch, look at things like Reddit. I'm not saying that all of these are necessarily 100% constructive, 24 hours a day, but there are people that would make really strong arguments that you can have relationship, you can have communities, not having ever met this person or knowing only their avatar, right? Like, and I just think it's like that typewriter word processor thing, and there's not a right or wrong. Now, I think that it's very, very difficult to, from a top-down standpoint, try to establish a community brand new online. Like it is more about like letting the learner drive and find their spaces and things like that. So it is hard to consider how to do it, in a top-down way. But I guess that's the only thing I would say is like it is happening, right? And I guess I would argue that both are great, right?
Yeah.
And we all are hungry for in person. I think one of the things we'll see coming out of this though is a twofold effect of COVID. One, because there's an impression, an expectation, curiosity that online is there for various reasons, right? So that's kind of more of a given now, right? And an exciting given. And I think there's a certain hunger for in-person interaction as well, right? For sure. And I think we got to make sure we do both well.
Interesting. Well, as you certainly know more than probably any of our guests, the final question that we ask all of our listeners, and if you've forgotten this, I'm so disappointed.
Favorite teacher? I didn't know if you were still on this.
Yeah, every guest for 3 years.
Absolutely.
Who is your favorite teacher and why?
I think maybe Rob, last time I have so many, right? Last time I might have given you Sister Cecilia, who knew the biology book by, page number and could tell, um, but gosh, there's so much. And if I can, I'll give you one and a half, right? Like, so shout out to Dr. Krause, my 19th century American lit professor at Northwestern, that was so excited about Faulkner that literally he would spit on you in the front rows. Like, I mean, the passion behind that. I mean, that man was incredible. But no, I think I'll pay tribute today to Sister Cynthia, my high school French instructor, who had this amazing way of like figuring out who individuals were. I had many different detentions, which at the time we called justice under God at my particular high school. I don't know if that's still the case.
Jug, of
Because
course.
I was trying to live by the preppy handbook at the time, and I didn't wear socks. She sadly thought I couldn't afford socks, and she gave me 2 pair of socks. I don't even know how she came upon these, right?
Wow.
She never asked me. She just gave me the socks. And from that day, I didn't get detention. I was just wearing those socks and trying to figure out what went with purple argyle,
That's great.
Yeah.
Was that what order was that, Sister?
So she, gosh, and I think you've asked me this. I think that she was Franciscan.
Franciscan.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think so. It was, it was a parish school in Detroit area.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great. So it's great hearing you talk about Ignatian pedagogy, Rob. I'm going to have to tell the Amerigo team that you've been converted by the Jesuits.
Oh yeah, I love that stuff. So yep, no, it's fun to think about how to make sure it lives through the online stuff.
That's great.
Well, Rob, thank you for coming back to the next class. To our listeners, if you like today's discussion, give us a thumbs up, a rating, share this with your family and friends, and we hope to see you again in a week or two on the next class.